Hello, and in today's video we are doing an FPL review of game week number 4. That's right, looking at how game week 4 got on and how we are looking going into game week 5, which of course is after an international break, the first international break of the season. So, first tip for you FPL managers, be very patient because there is UEFA Champions League coming up very, very soon, and there's also an international break this coming weekend, so do not make any early transfers. You might have seen already that Evan Ferguson, who absolutely tore it up for Brighton last game week, he's already been reported to miss the couple of games in the international break for the Republic of Ireland. So genuinely, do not make those transfers until probably at least 2 or 3 days before deadline. Ideally, a day or two before deadline, because the deadline this game week 5 will be on a Saturday for once. It's been a lot of Friday deadlines, but yeah, we're back to the Saturday 11 o'clock. So there's a lot of things that can change in that time. You've got press conferences, you've got possible injuries over the international break. You've got so much that can happen. So just save your transfer. Now, some people might have 2 free transfers going into game week 5. Not many, but if you did have 2 frees, then it's all the more reason to save them. But definitely, if you only have one, then I would definitely not be making any, because we just don't know. Some players could get injured. And also Champions League, let's see how that affects minutes and how we think about some certain players. So for instance, if someone like Julian Alvarez, who did very well for Manchester City in game week 4, if he starts the whole entire game in the Champions League, then maybe we might be a bit more... he probably will start game week 5, but we might be a bit more unsure about his minutes in game week 5, right? And that's the sort of info we need. So do not make any transfers yet. But yeah, in today's video, we're going to go through my game week 4 results and points and how that affected my rank. Just bear with me, people, whilst I plug in the power source, because we would not want the video stopping prematurely. That would be a bit of a nightmare. So yeah, ultimately game week 4 was an interesting one. A lot of people brought in those differentials, which is always exciting when those go off. But also there was a lot of template moves among the community this week, the likes of Raheem Sterling, James Maddison. Some people were bringing in forwards like Jackson for their nice juicy fixture against Nottingham Forest, and much, much more. And we'll go and discuss that in my Game Week 4 review. But before we get into any of that, and before I do talk a little bit about my FPL Mini League, because of course you might have seen in my Game Week 4 deadline stream that was on Friday at 6:30, I did discuss this, that there is no more entry, unfortunately, into my Mini League. The entry closed on the Game Week 4 deadline. So that means, of course, that you can't join my league. But ultimately, it was interesting to see the amount of people that did watch that video, and that we actually had one comment from someone saying, I'd like to join your league, but unfortunately it's too late now. But as I say, do join me next season, and I'll try and let you know what the code is to join, just because we wanted to have everyone all season in the league up to that first international break window. So yeah, that's what we've gone with. But we're going to talk about the mini league details as well. Who's the current standings for Game Week 4 going into the international break, and much more. So do smash a like on the video, share it with your mates. If you know someone that likes FPL content, then yeah, give a subscribe, give a share, and smash that like button. So let's get into the video then. Firstly, before any of that I talked about, I'm going to give a little debrief really on wildcards, because it is that stage of the season. It happens every season where managers are thinking, oh dear, I've made a few mistakes here. I need to correct those mistakes by wildcarding. And I think often international break is a great time to hit that button, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of injuries happen over the international break. So if you are on a wildcard, you can change your team up to the deadline. So therefore you can bring out those players that everyone is stuck with that might get injured over the international break. So it is quite a nice, flexible place to be. My own personal team, which we'll get onto in a second, I don't feel that I need the wild card just yet. I still feel it's a bit early, because I'm happy with my squad. It did very well in Game Week 4. Little spoiler there. But I think patience is the key with some managers. With other managers, where you have maybe 5 or 6 players out injured, or 5 or 6 players who look out of form or aren't getting the minutes, then I would say wildcarding now absolutely is a fine strategy. And ultimately, it is team dependent. It is dependent on who you've got. Have you got those, midfielders that are really in form, like James Maddison, like Brian and Bumo, like, your United midfielders, like maybe one of Rashford or Fernandes, or one of Saka or Ødegaard. But I thought I would, just kind of give a little debrief on those wildcarding, what my advice would be for those people, and then we will get on to the mini league and game week 4 results. So, wildcard discussions then, let's get into them. So, as I say, after the first 4 game weeks of the season have now been wrapped up, there is some genuine discussion from FPL managers about activating that wildcard chip. I think personally, it is, as I say, team dependent, but it's about having those 6 or more players who are injured or minutes risks or just out of form, really, out of favour, and you look at some other midfielders or defenders or attackers, preferably attackers or midfielders that are in form, because although defenders can have good periods of form, they struggle often, unless you're a Trent Alexander-Arnold of previous seasons gone by, that always scored a goal and always got an attack and return. This season is a bit different because of his price, and we'll go on to talk about Trent, who, of course, did well in Game Week 4, but is a current injury doubt. Ultimately, the points, though, generally will be in the midfield, and so also a bit in the attack as well. There haven't been loads of forwards that have been consistently amazing, like Haaland has, but there are still some good value at picks that you can go and get on your wild card. So what I would suggest is, because there's so many good midfielders, go for that 5 midfield, go for that 3-5-2, as we can see here. Funnily enough, actually, a good friend of mine on X, as they call it now, or Twitter, messaged me about wildcarding and asked for some advice. And, anyone that wants to ask for some advice, then feel free to message me at RobertoHollis9 on X. But yeah, it was really interesting discussion. I think ultimately, this was a sort of team that looks really strong for future game weeks. But it is all about those 5 midfield, because there's so much value in that position. I mean, someone like Heung-min Son, who, started off the season not very, very well at all. And, you kind of thought, is he back to the sort of tricky, out of form player he was last season, right? Because he was priced incredibly at 12 million, but that was just, because of the fact he was top scorer in the previous season with Salah. But then he really underperformed. And then he had that hat-trick off the bench against Leicester in last season's game, and everyone was like, Son is back, and it turned out that it was a false dawn, and Son really had a poor FPL season, didn't really recover until around game week 30-31, where he scored a few goals to win the season. But as I say, for that price at 12 million, he just was not good value. This season, of course, did take a price drop to 9 million, which, to be honest, even so, that price drop of 3 million is actually still quite a hard bargain, because of the fact that a lot of these midfielders have been cheaper that have done well this season. The likes of Brian and Bumo, the likes of Kaoru Mitoma, and Saka, is a bit underpriced at 8.5. So it's not easy to fit in someone like Son at 9 million, especially when you think Maddison provides better value in that midfield for Spurs at only 7.6 million or 7.5. So I think ultimately Son is still a bit of possibly a wait and see. We could see a Raheem Sterling situation where, okay, it wasn't Luton that Son played against, it was Burnley, but he did do very well against Burnley, and, it will be really good for Son if he can stay in that kind of number 9 position, because Richarlison's just not been working there. Let's monitor that situation. If Son stays in that position, then he will be a good FPL asset, but I wouldn't necessarily jump to him before we know Son is going to be that man, playing the number 9 role. You'd think they would, right? But, you never know with Postecoglou. He could change up situations to try and, get in a few other players. I don't know. That we'll have to see. But I think ultimately he could be a really good pick on the wild card, just because he's that differential that, maybe some people might not go for right away. Maddison, as I say, is just looking the most important Spurs asset. But with a couple of nice fixtures for Tottenham coming up, Sheffield United included, Maddison just looks essential for me. And then I've also got Destiny Udogie in there, who, to be honest, is a player I did ignore and kind of wish I owned. But the reason I didn't go for him, because of Spurs' defence has been unreliable in previous seasons. But this year, they look a bit more solid. The only problem I would say is with Ange Postecoglou's setup, that they are so attacking that they are going to leak goals at the other end of the pitch. So you're not guaranteed to get those clean sheets. But the great thing about Udogie is he's a very cheap 4.5 defender, and he does get the odd attack and return here and there. So yeah, very nice pick on the wild card. Also there you can see we've got Matt Turner in goal. Now, I don't advocate starting Matt Turner every single week because it is still a defence for Nottingham Forest that's not great. But with a nice fixture, he's a nice rotation goalkeeper to have alongside Flecken, who I've got on the bench there. So I think ultimately Turner is a good shout, especially with that Burnley fixture in game week 5. Then Trippier is a bit of a controversial one. I'm not sure about that one, especially with someone like Mbermo in that game week 5 up against him. But he's more of a long term. You could even start like a Rico Henry ahead of Trippier until we see better defensive numbers from Newcastle, because they have looked worrying. But ultimately, right, Trippier, the reason he's good at the moment is he's on those set pieces, so he could get that creative spark. But this season, FPL, as good as he was last season, he's not really shown he's justified that price tag yet. So it's a bit of a big call in that wild card Trippier, but you could even start Henry over him if you think Mbermo's going to score. But certainly Trippier is one for the long haul because of the fact that we have those Turner fixtures for Newcastle in game week number 7 and onwards. So game week 6 actually is a nice one as well. So I think Trippier is a long term, but maybe he's not justified his price. So at the same team, you can go for the cheaper 4.5 Botman. And although he doesn't get those attacking returns, he is nailed on pretty much when he's fit. We'll have to monitor if he's fit now. Obviously, he did come off with an injury a couple of weeks ago, so just wait and see with that. You could have Fabian Schär, but not sure about him. He's probably better options for that 5.0 price. But Botman could be decent if he's fit, so watch out for that. But yeah, and you'd feel more comfortable, to be honest, if you had Botman, because you could bench him some weeks, especially this week where you could see Mbermo scoring. So I'd probably actually go for Botman over Trippier and save 2 million and then just, reinvest it wherever, or just have that money in the bank. You could upgrade Baldock, for instance. But that's the general team I'd pick if I was wildcarding. Chilwell, I think, still is very nice. He's attacking. Although Chelsea defence is a bit up and down from week to week, they were quite poor against Forest. I still feel Chilwell is enough attacking upside. He's basically playing in the front three for a defender, which is not often you get an out-of-position player like that. So he's just worth it for the attacking upside alone. And there's not many defenders keeping clean sheets in FPL this season, so I would just back the attacking upside you can get from Chilwell. And there's some great fixtures coming up for Chelsea, even if they weren't great last week. I think Chilwell, he is getting early subs, which is a bit of a concern, but I think he could be still pretty nailed in that team. Saka, midfield, to me, it just picks itself. Saka's still such a good option. I know he didn't score against Man United, but he got the assist. He's on penalties, I think, most of the time. He might share some of them with Ødegaard, but I still believe he's the best Arsenal asset to own. Brian Mbeumo, just in great form, the Cameroon international, and fantastic goal against Bournemouth, I should say, with the lovely turn, the kind of flick with the heel, and then a composed finish past Neto. So he's a really nice one to own at the moment. We've talked about Maddison and Son. Rashford, I think, against Brighton isn't the best of fixtures, because it's not Brighton are no easy team to play against, but with a goal for Rashford last week against Arsenal, I think he can take that momentum into this game. He's actually got a great scoring record, Rashford, against Brighton, so I'd think about that. But ultimately, one of Fernandes or Rashford could be good going forward with United's turn of fixtures for Game Week 6 onwards. And then the front two, I think Alvarez is a nice differential pick. Very low ownership because of Pep Roulette, I suppose. But I think with De Bruyne out, with Jeremy Doku more playing on the right for Man City, and Alvarez is almost playing more as the second striker or sometimes even the number 10. I think it's different with De Bruyne now out injured, that people think Alvarez, will he play? But I think with De Bruyne out, with players like Foden playing more on the kind of left-hand side at times for Man City, I think it just makes sense that Alvarez at the moment, we'll have to see obviously if Bernardo plays more minutes, and someone like De Bruyne, when he comes back, that might be a different story. But it's possible that Alvarez doesn't play many games in the Champions League, so therefore he could get just played for the Premier League games. Because, City, do they have Alvarez in their starting 11? Well, maybe after a couple of good performances, they do. But in their strongest 11, Alvarez doesn't often play in the Champions League. So that's one to consider, I think. Players like Grealish, though, who is currently injured, when he's fit, he's the sort of example where you'd expect him to start for the Champions League fixtures. So one to monitor there for sure. But Alvarez, a nice spicy differential. And then, of course, you have to have Haaland, and you have to captain him every week, as you showed last week with the hat-trick against Fulham. And it just looked like it was going to be a good fixture for City. The highest XG see conceded for Fulham this season in terms of defences. So I did talk about that actually on my recent appearance. So if you did miss it, go check out on the Spotify or any of your podcast providers, search in Fantasy 606. And it was the Game Week 4 preview. So it talked about cash dispenser or cash converter, I think, and Malo Gusto, and there was there was Tony Bellew on the pod, so it was great to hear him. But yeah, I joined in talking about the listeners team, made the transfers. I thought I was pretty unlucky with my transfers in Game Week 4, to be honest, because I brought in Wissa for Pedro, which made on sense a lot of paper, on paper. So Wissa obviously didn't score against Bournemouth. It looked like he would have done. Did hit the post, so very unlucky. And of course, of all weeks, Pedro does start this week, much to a lot of people's surprise. But to be fair, it was unfortunate timing with Ferguson. Obviously, he did very well, but the likes of Welbeck did get injured ahead of that Newcastle game, and obviously Enciso's still out. So Pedro, I didn't think played brilliantly. A lot of people in the community thought he did. Ultimately, he worked hard, I admit that, but I thought whenever he received the ball, he often lost it. And I didn't think he was brilliant in terms of the final third. Yeah, I had that big chance after some nice team play from Brighton, and he should have really got that on target. So I didn't love his performance. A lot of the Epic community thought he was brilliant, but ultimately maybe I'm more critical because of the being a Watford fan, ex-Watford player and all that. But yeah, interesting one that. Ultimately, though, Wissa did unfortunately blank, and it was unlucky. Did use the 2 free transfers, so at least I didn't take a -4 for the listeners team. The other move I made, also on paper, looked really logical. Took out Mohamed Salah because at that price of 12.5, he's just not been performing for his value. He's been getting the odd kind of return, 5-pointer here or there. But of course, this week in Game Week 4, he did of course score against Aston Villa. Got the 8-pointer, which to be honest is not massive. Returns, not a massive regret there, but still 8-point return. It's a shame that Sterling blanked against Nottingham Forest. Again, a player who a lot of people brought in this week, looked a good fixture, looked a good pick, Sterling, but it just shows that Chelsea attack might be one that needs to click a bit later on, so we'll have to see with that. And then the rest of my wildcard team, if I was wildcarding in Game Week 5, I'd have Flecken. I think the rotating pair of Flecken and Turner makes a lot of sense because Brentford aren't going to have great fixtures every week, but then I think they do rotate with Forest quite nicely. I think Flecken is the 4.5 to go for, though, ultimately, because Brentford have just been a solid defence for a couple seasons now, and Flecken gets a lot of save points, so it just makes a lot of sense, really. I wouldn't spend as much as 5.0 for a goalkeeper. They don't really seem to be performing too much at the moment. And then talking about Brentford defence, you've got Rico Henry there, so you don't have to start both Henry and Flecken together every single week because, of course, to double up on a defence this early in the season is a bit of a risk. But I think Henry is such a good pick for his attacking upside. He gets a lot of forward positions. He was so unlucky, actually, to not get a return for Brian Mbumo, who had a shot, really should have scored, a bit of a sitter, but it was a fantastic piece of play from Henry to set up the chance. So he's very attacking as a fullback and only 4.5 million. And then Baldock as a 4.0 defender. Now, I admit Sheffield United defence is a bit of a problem. Baldock was rumoured of leaving, but he's now decided to stay. I think he's still the 4.0 to go for. I think someone like Kabore, as you saw in the last week, is a bit of a minutes risk, was benched. And also you saw Bayer for Burnley. They are conceding a lot of goals, Burnley, at the moment, and Bayer just, is getting, decent minutes, but he's not really as attacking an option as Baldock. I did talk about Baldock as my 4.0 defender of choice at the start of the season. I did a little video on who could be the next Lundstrom, who could be the next Stuart Dallas. So if you did miss that, go and check it out. But I said Baldock back in July or whenever I filmed it. So let's see if he does win the 4.0 defender battle. Obviously, Malo Gusto last week in Game Week 3 was incredible against Luton, but then didn't do well in Game Week 4. I do think ultimately that Reece James could be back after the international break, so I think Malo Gusto was always a bit too short-term of a pick. But yeah, ultimately I do think Baldock's still decent. And then we've got Cameron Archer, who looks like the 4.5 forward to own. Looked a fantastic player against Everton with a goal and an assist. I mean, ultimately the assist was very fortuitous off the back of Jordan Pickford. But ultimately, he looks really good, and I think he's a 4.5 that makes a lot of sense over the others. So yeah, ultimately, that's the team I'd pick if I was wildcarding. But ultimately, yeah, my advice for Game Week 5, the wildcard, ultimately, yeah, go for it if your team needs it. It's very much team dependent. But yeah, hopefully, you did like that tweet I sent out about who are some wildcardable assets. I think ultimately, if you have some of those players in your wildcard, then you should be doing fairly okay. So that's my little wildcard part to the video. Now we're going to talk about the main bit, which is, of course, my Game Week 4 review. Here it is, in all its glory. 84 points in Game Week 4. Yes, very happy with this indeed. Very happy after, a tricky couple of game weeks in Game Week 2 and 3. The key with FPL is to stay patient, to keep doing what you're doing, and, do what you trust in. Trust in the decision, not always the outcome, because from week to week, you can make a great transfer, and it doesn't pay off the first week. But then you got to look at -4s. You got to look at certain transfers over a 3 or 4 week period to see, was it a good decision over the long run? Yes, it was. So just don't react knee-jerk too much about bad game weeks, because ultimately it's a long season. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And, I was struggling after Game Week 3 and 2 because I thought I'd made good transfers, right? I brought in Rico Henry for Matty Cash in Game Week 2. Matty Cash actually started the Everton game, got the clean sheet. So did Henry, but he got 5 points. It's only a 1 point difference. Not too fussed about that. But then Game Week 3, of course, it was a big swing. Henry, unfortunately, clean sheet wipeout against Palace. Matty Cash scores out of nowhere those 2 goals against Burnley. And it's an absolute killer 15-point swing. And I thought, what am I doing here? Like, why have I done this? It's a bad transfer. But ultimately, then I go to Game Week 3. Game Week 4, and Henry obviously starts the game. Unlucky to not get an assist. As I say, he looked really good against Bournemouth. But then Matty Cash, the aforementioned, does score an own goal. So it just shows these things can balance out, and eventually the cream will rise to the top. But let's talk about Game Week 4 and what it did for my rank, etc. So Game Week 4, going into Game Week 4, of course, I didn't have 2 free transfers. I did have just the 1 free transfer, and after doing those 2 2 transfers, I should say, in Game Week 3, I bring in Brian Mbumo for Mohamed Salah. He, of course, didn't get that goal against Palace in Game Week 3, and Salah got the assist up at Newcastle. Bit of a shame that. And then Chilwell was coming in for that Luton game, and he came in for Gabriel for Arsenal, who didn't play against the third Fulham fixture. So ultimately, that was a good fixture. I was hoping Chilwell would do well again for me this week. He didn't do that, but we'll get onto that. But in Game Week 4, I took another -4 after Game Week 3, which is a risk, I know. But I think ultimately with -4s, it just shows that they can come off if they're high upside moves and if they have a high ceiling. If they didn't come off the previous week, just because you do it again doesn't mean that it will be the same story, right? So ultimately, Mbumo and that didn't really work out, but Chilwell did get the clean sheet at least against Luton. It did ultimately, ended up being a -2, I think, when you considered all the points. So not a great swing there, but it was a much better swing in Game Week 4 for my -4 hit, because it was a 10-point gain for my hit. So it just shows. Onana, let's talk about him. Now, he is a bit of a pain in the everything, basically. Real frustration with this pick, because the start of the season, he looked a nice pick. Always going to be, likely to get save points. You thought, passing out from the back, he's going to get some pass completion rate. That helps with bonus points. But United defensively have been a bit of a nightmare. They got away with it massively against Wolves and got the 9-pointer, which I was happy with, of course, but he did really get lucky for that. Should have been a penalty after the foul from Onana. And in Game Week 2 against Spurs, very, very disappointing. I thought he'd get at least some save points, but, ultimately nothing there. I didn't actually start him in the end, but Matt Turner got the exact same score of 2 points. Then Game Week 3, I started Onana again against Nottingham Forest, who, last season away from home, they weren't the best of teams. Although Awani was on a good scoring run, he didn't actually score in Game Week 4, Awani, but did score against Onana, and Onana made a big mistake for that goal in the early stages, and conceding 2 in the first 4 minutes, it was a nightmare. So he got a 0-pointer, didn't even get the save points, and Matt Turner, meanwhile, on my bench in that fixture, Game Week 3, gets incredible more points, 3 points in that fixture. So just frustrating, but you always would back the United defence over the Forest defence, usually. But this season, as I say, United not looking good defensively. And then last game week, right? Okay, fair enough. It's a tough fixture. I didn't expect any, clean sheet points, maybe the odd save point here and there. But yet, he doesn't get any save points. and gets up a yellow card, and you just think, why? Like, 3 conceded, not ideal at all. Onana, it's a bit of an issue, but it's an issue that I'm not sure I need to really solve right now unless I had 2 free transfers, which, of course, after taking the hit, I don't. He's a luxury move, really, because there are other goalkeepers that are doing well. Not loads of other keepers, to be honest, that I'm massively interested in. There's the likes of Flecken, who I've talked about. Turner, I've already got, but I wouldn't start him every week. And then you've got maybe keepers like Pickford. That's a bit of an L, bit more of an L than Onana. But even last week, right, Pickford got 1 point with an own goal, and yet Onana still got less than him. So it just shows that goalkeepers don't score that many points ultimately. So is it worth really changing them? I mean, Edison, he's a bit of a troll, often concedes late for Man City, but he's not a bad option. It's just not ideal. And then you've got players in goal for Spurs, for instance. You've got Vicario, who's got some save points, but he does concede sometimes with Spurs attacking football. They are going to concede a few. So I think it's tricky to get the right keeper. I think Flecken is really the one, but hindsight's a wonderful thing if I'd have gone for him. But ultimately, yeah, it's just one of those things. Didn't do well against Arsenal. The fixtures do turn, though, from Game Week 6 onwards, so I'm thinking maybe it's just one I have to be patient with, but I'd love to sell him. It's just a luxury move. Then Chilwell against Nottingham Forest. You thought, yep, clean sheet, hopefully, but no. They concede to Anthony Elanga, who, to be fair, did look very good for Forest. But Chilwell, a bit annoying the last few weeks, because I brought him in Game Week 3, right? Game Week 3 is the week he decides to not shoot against Luton and pass when he's right in front of the goal. Okay, 6 points. At least we take the clean sheet, but could have been so much more. Then Game Week 4, Chilwell decides to not really get involved in the attack as much as usual, and also gets another early sub like he was in the game up at West Ham. He got subbed off early, and he does that again. 61 minutes in. By that point, Chelsea have already conceded, and he gets subbed off. I mean, he could have got attack and return those last 30 minutes. Why are Chelsea taking him off? But it's a bit of a wonder. I think maybe they're just trying to save him minutes-wise in his legs. I think it's not a massive issue. That I think he is pretty nailed to play most games and start the majority of them. And, the early subs aren't ideal, of course, but I don't think they're going to be that regular, I would imagine. Or maybe they could even bank the clean sheet before he gets, Chelsea concede before that. And, he could then get the clean sheet even if Chelsea do concede, with the subs. So I think Chilwell's just, one to sleep on. He's a good asset to own. Attacking upside is there. Chelsea defensively not brilliant, admittedly, but I think he's just one of the better defenders to own. So I'd just stick with him. Then Henry against Bournemouth. Yeah, I was kind of expecting a clean sheet here. I can't lie. When I see that Dominic Solanke scored, I'm gutted. And then another goal for Bournemouth from David Brooks. Very happy for him on a personal level. He's gone for a lot cancer, so it's a brilliant thing to see, obviously. But for my FPL defence, not ideal. Ultimately, Rico Henry's still, though, so attacking and so unlucky, really, to not get an assist in that game. So I think Henry's still a fantastic pick going forward. Some nice fixtures with Newcastle up next, not ideal, but then you've got Forest and Everton and then Burnley as well. So I think he's really nice. But ultimately, 1 pointer this week, a bit of a shame, as was with Chilwell. And then we've got Estupiñán. Now, this was a really interesting one because a few people benched Estupiñán this week. And they did get away with it, I'll be honest, because I thought he was going to get an attack and return. I thought the clean sheet was looking good. And then last minute of the game, Wilson scores a consolation, always a killer to wipe out that clean sheet. But I think with Newcastle, that was a tricky fixture on paper. Maybe you could have seen a clean sheet wipe out there. Ultimately, Brighton going forward, yeah, okay, they're not the easiest of fixtures, to say the least. But I think with Estupiñán, he can get attack and returns in any game. So I would just be too scared to sell him. I'd just start him most weeks if you can. And yeah, just go with the attacking upside that he offers. I think he's pretty safe, even with Europa League coming up. He'll probably play most games still. And yeah, Man United away, not ideal fixture next week, but again, he could get attack and return against anyone. So yeah, not ideal, but the attack and returns is why we have him, not for the clean sheets, because we know that Brighton, as a defence, have not been the best of clean sheets teams. Now, moving on to midfield, what did we do here? Well, we did bring in a new arrival. Let's talk about him. James Maddison. He was one of my transfers in the -4. So we sold Gabriel Martinelli ahead of that fixture against Man United, which, to be honest, I knew that United fixture was not a bad one on paper because we've seen how bad defensively United have been. And I thought Martinelli is still a good pick, right? I didn't sell him because he was a bad pick, but I just sold him because he was my weakest link across that midfield five. I had Mbumo with a great fixture. I had Fernandes, who was on penalties, and also the fact that those fixtures look really nice for Game Week 6 onwards. And Fernandes had just got that 12-pointer against Forest and was looking good. Mitoma, obviously, didn't have an easy fixture, but I thought even with the tricky fixtures for Brighton, he was one to just hold because Mitoma can score against anyone and he was always looking threatening. I think he's pretty nailed, even with Europa League coming in. I think he'll start most games and I would quite like to keep him for that game against Bournemouth in Game Week 6. And then, of course, Saka was always going to stay because he's the best Arsenal midfielder in my view. And he's on penalties most of the time at least. And, actually had a decent record against Manchester United. And it did get an attacking return. But ultimately, Martinelli, in this current system Arsenal were playing the first 3 weeks, he didn't look like he was profiting really. Just the 1 assist in 3 games was quite disappointing. And I didn't think he was going to get that much points. Wasn't a high upside explosive so far this season. So he left. Maddison came in and Maddison got the goal against Burnley. And Maddison obviously did outscore Martinelli this week, so the transfer worked for Game Week 4. I admit I'll be hiding behind the sofa for Game Week 5 with Martinelli facing Everton. Let's see if he does get minutes rotated with Trossard. We'll have to wait and see. But ultimately, I do look at it and think that Maddison is a player I'd want for long term, and ultimately he was just too good to ignore. Great goal against Burnley. What a finish. Strokes it in. And yeah, as I say, net gain of 2 points there with the 5 from Martinelli, 7 from Maddison. But yeah, he's just one I want to own for a long time, really, Maddison. He's just the absolute talisman of that Spurs team now that Kane's left. Write the theme tune, sing the theme tune. He does everything for that Spurs team. He does set pieces, he does free kicks, he does it all. And it's all going through him. So it looks a really nice pick, Maddison. And ultimately, those that went for Sterling, at the end of the day, it's an unfortunate one in Game Week number 4. But it was a Maddison or Sterling. For me, Maddison was always the winner because I just liked the fact he was so central to that attack. And he's a proven FPL asset. So you could argue is Sterling, but I think ultimately Sterling's form in the last couple of seasons has been a bit wishy-washy, whereas Maddison's always been consistent, ticks along with points. So that's what swayed me to that decision, but I think those went with Sterling. I'd still hold him. He could come good in the next few weeks. But yeah, Maddison goal against Burnley, lovely stuff. Mbumo, my guy. Brian Mbumo, I talked about in the preview of Game Week 4 in the last video how this guy needed to be my guy this weekend, and boy, he was. Now, I'll admit, I was sweating because I thought this guy is going to blank. It's going to be an absolute joke. I've brought him in for the last week, blanked against Palace. He's going to blank again, but then he comes in clutch in the last few games, minutes of the game, I should say, and it's a fantastic touch, a fantastic finish, and an 8-pointer. So a bonus point in there as well. Lovely jubbly, my guy Brian, and great to see him get those returns. So yeah, really happy with him going forward. Great fixtures. And he's on penalties. He's just a good asset all round, and one that I slept on really in pre-season because he didn't look great in pre-season, but now he looks really good to own. Fernandes, 2-pointer. Frustrating, I can't lie, especially when Marcus Rashford, who haven't owned for the whole season, to be honest, has been a good shout going with just Bruno because he's got more returns, it feels like, than Rashford at a cheaper price as well. But obviously last week Fernandes did win out in Game Week 3, but last week Rashford was the victor. Got the goal, his first of the season against Arsenal. Does have a good record against them, so maybe that was inevitable. But look, I still think Fernandes is still creative in that United attack. Still the main man for them, creating chances on penalties. Still cheaper than Rashford. I still feel like long term he could be the better pick than Rashford. Obviously Rashford, now that Højlund is in, he can play on that left hand side, which does improve his FPL prospects. But I think it's just one of those things. If you've got Rashford, keep him. If you've got Fernandes, keep him. I wouldn't switch between the two because they'll probably even out. But yeah, admittedly, the ownership of Rashford was a bit of a killer for my team last week. Then Mitoma, 5-pointer. Look, at the end of the day, Brighton do score a lot of goals, and Mitoma doesn't explode ultimately, but he looked great against Wolves in Game Week 2. He does chip along with points, and to be honest, I don't mind that. I still prefer him to Solly March. Although March, does seem to have got more FPL points, I still feel that Mitoma's a bit more nailed. March can get subbed off early, for instance, for Brighton. So I do like that pick of Mitoma, and I think, even with the tricky Man United fixture, on paper, that's not that hard with how United are defending at the moment. And then you got Bournemouth. Maybe look to sell after that, but we'll have to wait and see how Mitoma does. But yeah, he's just one I'm going to probably just sleep on at the moment. Then Bukayo Saka, look, a bit frustrating. Obviously, didn't get the goal that we thought he would get against that Manchester United defence. I thought he was going to cook, I'll be honest, but just got the one assist. Did get the corner for the Rice goal, and that's why we have him as well. He's on set pieces, so it's nice that he's on penalties and corners. But yeah, did get booked. Bit of a shame. Probably could have been more, actually. It was a bit of a bad challenge, but at least he got the assist, so we don't mind that. Saka, as I said, it's just a wait and hold, really, a bit of a season keeper like Maddison. So yeah, we got the return there. So look, ultimately a very nice midfield. Only Bruno, the one to not get a return in my midfield. So ultimately, we're very happy about that. We are very, very happy indeed, and hopefully, sorry, I'm just going to have to go back and got to take a call. I'll be back in a sec. Sorry about that, people. I had a call I had to take, and it might call me again. So just bear with me if it does. That's a bit of a pain, but it is what it is. That these things can happen. So apologies for that. Yeah. So what was I saying? Yeah, the midfield five. Everyone other than Bruno returned, which is really nice to see when that happens. And then there you can see my other transfer this week was, I did end up bringing in Alvarez, my differential this week. I talked about it in my preview video. A few other options, kind of to narrow some down, some nice picks. And Alvarez was the one I was really hot on pre-deadline because I was really liking that Fulham fixture. As I talked about, the XG conceded for Fulham. They are a team that defensively looked all over the shop in the first few weeks. And Alvarez, I thought, really did look good against Sheffield United for me. He passed the eye test, had that big chance that was saved. Unlucky one, I think Fotheringham just kind of saved it close range, but he's getting in good positions, Alvarez. I was just surprised how lowly owned he was, only about 9.8%. I guess Pep Roulette was the reason why people didn't go there, but for me, when Alvarez is pretty much a fair fixture and fair starter in that Man City attack, he looks so good. And the fact he wasn't playing games last season was pretty criminal because whenever he did, he scored bangers and he scored great amount of goals for the minutes he got. So yeah, I love Alvarez as a pick, and he did really well for me this week. 14-pointer, a goal, 2 assists, 2 bonus. I mean, that's not bad, is it, for a nice differential pick? 14-pointer. So yeah, and Alvarez, it's pleasing to see that he's on set piece duty as well. He's on corners and sometimes free kicks. So yeah, it was nice to get that pick ahead of the curve because I feel like a lot of people now will bring in Alvarez because they'll see that performance and just bring him in because it looks like he's fairly safe for minutes. I mean, the thing is, as I said, with Champions League, one to watch if he does play all of that game against. I think they're playing Red Star Belgrade. Whoever they're playing, let's wait and see how many minutes he gets. But yeah, certainly looks a really attractive option. And I think now it was 9.8% his ownership. It's probably crept up now by quite a bit. Yeah, 13%. So it's quite a big number of people bring him in. As I said, I wouldn't make early transfers. Wait and see what people do in terms of injuries and stuff like that. So yeah, ultimately really happy with that pick and happy with that -4. It was just, as I said, a high upside move, a high ceiling I feel like there is with Alvarez. And when he does explode, he does look really good. And yeah, so La Araña with the spider-like, skills, spinning those webs, scoring those goals. Thank you for that, Alvarez. So yeah, ultimately he came in for Joao Pedro, who I did think was going to be a rotation risk going forward. Ultimately, it's just one of those things. I think ultimately this week it didn't pay off because of all the weeks. Unfortunately, Pedro did start this week. Not many people saw that coming, but as I say, with that Welbeck injury, it was different circumstances. I think going forward, though, he's still a bit of a risk because they have just brought in Ansu Fati, and I think that he'll most likely rotate with Pedro going forward. So I'd love to see Pedro play minutes, of course. As a Watford fan, I'm a bit biased, but I think he's definitely got potential. I didn't think he looked brilliant against Newcastle. Of course, did get a blank in the end, so it was a nice 12-point swing to get in Alvarez. So ultimately, as I say, a 10-point swing, bringing in Alvarez and Maddison this week for Pedro and Martinelli did really work. So just shows -4s can really pay off if they're done carefully and done with high upside. But Erling Haaland, what an absolute robot this guy is. He is incredible, and if you didn't captain him in Game Week 4, I feel for you, but to be honest, I don't really pity you that much, because this guy's a robot, right? He showed it last season, 36 goals in his debut season, so why would you doubt him? I know he did miss a penalty against Sheffield United, but come on, like, he's not a robot. He's going to make some mistakes, but he still scored in that game anyway, so he's just an absolute joke. And as I said, with how bad Fulham looked this season defensively, it was just a no-brainer captaincy. Just don't even try and bet against him, right? You can try and get all clever, but the guy's 91% owned, right? So 9% of the whole world, I don't know why that 9% even are doing that, but 9% of the whole world, only theirs, don't have him. So you're pretty much going to get a red arrow if you don't captain him. Even if he blanks, you might still get a red arrow, because, that'll get 4 points, right? If you get a blank for the captaincy. And so if you've got a captain that's, ended up getting 1 point, then you'll only get 3 and you'll still get a red arrow, right? So it's these kind of things. When the ownership is that high, just do not go against it, because it's just going to hurt your rank. So, yeah, unbelievable performance from Erling Haaland. Gets the hat-trick, gets an assist as well for the goal for Alvarez. So, yeah, look, it was incredible. So this is why we own Erling Haaland. And going forward, his fixtures are also looking lovely. Nottingham Forest in game week number 6. So let's move on to the bench. Ultimately, a bit of a shame. Again, I talked about Onana and Turner last week with the 3-pointer that I didn't see coming. Again, I didn't see this coming. On paper, it looked sensible, right, to start Onana, because, again, you'd back the United defence over the Forest defence most weeks. They had an interesting fixture away to Chelsea that I thought Chelsea looked quite good against Luton, but as I say, it was a bit of a false dawn. And so he did end up getting the clean sheet. Got the 5-pointer as well, and at least he got booked, which is the consolation for his bonus points. Didn't end up getting any bonus points, because I think at one point he looked like he was on for a 9-pointer. But ultimately, yeah, it is interesting. I think ultimately I would just stick with the stronger keeper most weeks. But yeah, 5-point for Turner. It's a bit of a pain to see that, but I think that just shows he's a good asset to own as a rotating pair. Mark Gay, I'm glad I benched him, because I was worried about the Palace clean sheet against Wolves, because Wolves have been quite goal shy this season, but it was the right decision to bench him this week, because of course Wolves scored 2 in that game, and yeah, that was not great from Palace defensively. So yeah, one to monitor in the coming weeks. Do I want to keep Mark Gay when he's not got as much attacking upside? And obviously, he's done well for me the weeks I've played him, and he's been my little differential defender, 4.5 rotation. But yeah, Palace's fixtures are getting a bit trickier, so wait and see with that. But Baldock, obviously, as I said, I think he's my favourite 4.0 defender. But he's just one of those players. He's playing for a bad defence. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on Baldock? Get in the comments. But I think he's still probably the strongest 4.0. He's just one of those players to just not think about and just leave on your bench. But when you need to come in and you've got terrible fixtures for everyone else, right? He could get attack and return. He could get the odd clean sheet. Not a bad option in my view. And then Mubama against Luton didn't play at all, any minutes. Look, at the end of the day, he's getting named on the substitutes bench, but he's not coming on. So, again, it's a bit like with Baldock, right? He's a 4.5 forward. He's not a position you'd need to change regularly, because it's unlikely that your third sub is going to get used. So just leave him there. If you've got Archer, of course, that's brilliant, because then you can actually play him at some weeks where you've got bad fixtures for your other players. But yeah, if you haven't got a good 4.5, don't worry about it. Ultimately, if you had someone like Sam Surridge, right, who's not in the game anymore, that would be an issue, because you'd lose rank from them, because everyone sold him, right? And also 4.5 options like, let me think of someone else. There's someone else out there, I'm sure there is. But ultimately, I don't think Mubama's taken too many price drops. And even if he does, right, the way the game is going this season, we don't have massive premiums, and we've got cheap midfielders. So budget is not an issue, right? We actually have money left over in the bank. So team value is not the end of the world. So I wouldn't necessarily make early transfers from this point to try and catch the value, because you're not necessarily going to need that at this stage. So yeah, ultimately, Mubama, fine, whatever. So yeah, ultimately, a really nice game week for me. And this is what it's done for my game week rank. Good first green arrow of the season is good to see. As I said, it's all about keeping that discipline and keeping going. And as you'll see here, my previous seasons, this 1920 rank is actually a bit false. It's very, very false. And the reason for that is, I did explain it in a previous video, but basically, that was the COVID season, so I made a second team on my current email. Back then, I was using my dad's email, and I ended up getting a decent finish. I mean, I say decent. It was my second season, so I was still taking loads of hits. But ultimately, on this dad's email, which of course is now not being used by me, so I don't know, it's not on FPL websites anymore. But my point is, I've got record of it on my phone that I got the email from FPL showing my rank, so it is a legitimate rank. But yeah, in that season, I finished with an overall rank of, let me just find it for you people. Sorry about this. Yeah, so 1920, I got 2006 overall points. Obviously, I didn't get 504 with a sensible team. That was just a post-lockdown team I had a bit of fun with. Took loads of -4s. And then, yeah, 2006 overall points. My rank was 1,834,861. So still a pretty bad rank in comparison to my last couple of seasons, which was really good. Top 110k, and then also a top 19k finish there. So yeah, ultimately good seasons the last few, but yeah, good to see me get that first green arrow of the season, shot up from 1.5 million to 1.16 million. So nice to see that when you have a good week like I did last week, it really can make a difference for your rank, and that's about a 380k drop green arrow, so really nice. So yeah, that's my game week. So as I say, we're going to quickly touch on the mini league now, and then we'll end the video. But if you did go on to enjoy that video, then do give it a like and comment your scores from Game Week 4. Obviously, it's an international break, so got to have a bit of interaction, because what else is there going to be to do? No transfers to think about for a little while yet. So this is the mini league going into Game Week number 5. This is what we're looking at. The top 10, joint 10th, or should I say joint 9th at the bottom stage there. We've got Monjil Chakraborty with a great team name, I've got to say. Just so happens to be my team name. He's obviously taken a leaf out of my book. Great minds think alike and all that. With a team name Bruno dos Tres. That is my team name as well, so, fair enough. Then we've also got Egan Brown, I think that's the pronunciation right, hopefully, with Alice in Wonderland, great team name, very good week, 83 points, as was Monjil's 87. Then we had FPL Baskets, great account I follow on Twitter, so very good week for you, mate, 88 from you, 280 overall points, and tied in 7th with 280, we've got Josh Brackstone with Nice to Mitro, again, great team name, 86 points. Then, can I just give a massive shout out to FPL Roo, who I follow on Twitter, one of the guys that is a big supporter of FPL Juice, one of the great channels I follow on YouTube. But FPL Roo, an unbelievable 106 points. Let's just go into this and see it, because, wow, it's incredible stuff. I mean, the first few weeks, 40 points, Game Week 3, you wouldn't have really expected it. A great first game week, I've got to say. Especially love that Mbermo pick, because not many people was on him in Game Week 1. But the thing I love the most is, Game Week 4, unbelievable. Didn't even make a transfer, and yet this guy gets 106 points. So it just shows that sometimes patience pays off, especially with the likes of Son and Eberiche Eze in this team, with 8-pointer and a hat-trick for Son against Burnley. So yeah, it just shows patience pays off. A top 40k rank this game week is incredible. And yeah, ranked now in the top 55k overall, so very, very strong start to the season. Nice hat-trick there for Son. And Burmo 8-pointer, Rashford goal, Eze goal, Saka assist, and then of course, just like me, we're going for the Alvarez shout. Really nice 14-pointer there. So yeah, well done from Tommy. Really impressive stuff from FPL Roo. But yeah, just going back to the rest of the mini league, if we just quickly switch back, here is what we are looking at. We have in 5th place with 283 overall points, 89 this week. It is FPL Crusader, all about that Bassi. Great team name, because obviously all about that base from Megan Trainor and the new Fulham player Calvin Bassi. Fantastic team name. Then we've got Block City FC, Paolo Greco with 74 points, 286 overall. And then down to 3rd, Spencer O'Leary, good mate of mine. Very good week for you still, 71. Strong start to the season, 286 overall points. And then up to 2nd, very good week from Ethan Beecher, 86 points for than Beecher United 291. So then up top, still, he was Game Week 1's leader, and he's still up top after the first 4 weeks. It's really impressive stuff. 316 overall with a nice 78 this week. It's Ashley Valentin, Pochettino's Chelsea. He was, of course, the manager of the month for August, with a very nice first 3 game weeks, but also a very decent game week 4. As I said, that Alvarez pick, very nice. Maddison goal, nice as well. And of course, that bench. I mean, it's a very strong team, to be honest. He must have, bench boost in game week 1. So, yeah, very, very decent. Leno was the right goalkeeper to bench this week as well. So, yeah, look, very strong week. And very great to see so many people in the mini league. So, unfortunately, as I say, you can't join it now, but do make sure you set yourself a reminder to join it next season, if possible. I'm currently ranked 85th in the mini league out of my own mini league. So, yeah, it's not too bad. Decent stuff there. So, yeah, just looking at all of the people in the league, there is 231, it seems, in the mini league, which, to be honest, is unbelievable. It does say 231, but there's a few, obviously, people with joint ranks of, they're both tied on 223rd or whatever, for instance. Not in this case, but you know what I mean. So there's probably a little bit more, maybe 232, 34, something like that. But yeah, it's an incredible number. It's the record number of people in my mini league. So really appreciate everyone joining. As I said, if you want to be in the mini league and you were in it this season, then just refresh your mini leagues at the start of next FPL season, where it comes up with the tab Renew Mini Leagues. You can just click that and you should auto join back again. But yeah, that is my team and also my mini leagues. Well, what is my team looking like? A little bus team ahead of Game Week 5. Obviously, we won't get into this too much because that'll be my Game Week 5 preview, which will be coming out ahead of the deadline on the Game Week 5 day. But let's talk about my Game Week 5 lineup as it stands. I've got to say, shout out to Chrome extensions, because this Chrome extension for FPL Away Kit is absolutely class. I'm just gonna leave you for a second, just to marvel at this beauty. Okay, so at the moment, my goalkeeper is Turner. Now, I will maybe think about that differently if I end up replacing Anana. But the thing is, with only one free transfer ahead of game week number 5, it just seems a bit of a luxury move. So I don't know if it's worth it. But ultimately, Brighton are a team that are so good in attack. I can see United conceding. I mean, even with their way that the defence is going at the moment. I mean, maybe Anana could get some save points. But for me, I think you just got to back the fixture. Sometimes you can back these rotating keepers and back the wrong player, and you always think, oh, I should have gone that. But that's hindsight. With those fixtures, without hindsight, you'd still back Turner, hopefully against a Burnley attack that's not been amazing. I mean, obviously, the last couple of weeks, the likes of Lyle Foster has done quite well for them, but I don't know. Forest at home, they fancy their chances maybe there for a clean sheet. We'll have to see. But yeah, I think I like that generally as a pick. Turner's got save points in him as well, so I think hopefully that should do well. So yeah. Anyway, then in defence, we've gone with Chilwell. Now, of course, Chilwell's so attacking upside. Love that a little juicy dock away kit for Chelsea against Bournemouth. So yeah, maybe a clean sheet. We'll have to see. I mean, look, Solanke's looked quite good for them. Obviously, they did well against Brentford, but not the best of fixtures on paper. I could see Chelsea conceding there, but look, I still feel Chilwell is just so attacking. He's worth it. I know this is a long video as well, but hopefully it'll be worth it. Then Henry against Newcastle. Again, a fixture I could probably see Brentford conceding, to be honest. As well as Brentford have been defending most weeks, I think Newcastle at home, you'd probably back them to score. Even though they didn't look great against Brighton, I think that's not the easiest of games for a defender. But hopefully an attacking return for Henry, that would be nice. And then a Estupinian, tricky, but it's just Estupinian. So in terms of the rest of the team, I mean, that midfield picks itself, to be honest. They're all good assets, in my view, and most of them with nice fixtures. I mean, look, you could even think United away is a good fixture for Mitoma, but especially I think the other lot, Maddison and Saka, and Abumo's in good form, so makes sense. And then Alvarez and Haaland, West Ham. I'm still not convinced defensively on West Ham, but anyway, the point is that's my team as it stands. No transfers made. 1 million. I think is it 1 million in the bank? Actually, no. I think I got a bit more than that. Let me have a look. 4.4 actually. So yeah, quite a lot of money to work with. So yeah, look, a few options there. Let me know if you've got any thoughts of what transfers I should make for Game Week 5 down below. But yeah, that's the current team as it stands. I think Gay against Villa is going to be a tricky game for him to keep a clean sheet as it stands. Bulldog actually is funny. He did score in the game up at Spurs a couple seasons back, but nah, he probably won't. And then yeah, Mubama, as much as third bench as you can get with that City game. So yeah, don't mind that at all. I think it's decent, and might even roll the transfer in Game Week 5. That's my current thoughts. Probably will roll the transfer because there's just no pressing moves there, but we'll have to wait and see. As I say, if you did enjoy the video, do smash a like on it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.